Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into one of the most foundational stories ever, the first few chapters of Exodus.
That's right. We're looking at Israel's journey, from prosperity in Egypt right down into brutal oppression.
And the birth of Moses, this pivotal leader. Plus how God's hand seems to be working behind the scenes in some really unexpected ways.
Our guide for this is a fantastic Bible study resource, full of historical context and some deep insights.
So the big question we're tackling is, how does a group of people, seemingly totally forgotten and crushed, find hope, find deliverance?
And maybe more importantly, what does this ancient story mean for us today when we face things that just feel overwhelming?
Exactly. This deep dive should hopefully offer a shortcut to understanding that power, that divine intervention, even when things look incredibly bleak.
It's a story that really does resonate.
It really does. So let's start at the beginning. Jacob's family, they arise in Egypt, just 70 people. Seems small.
Tiny, really, in the grand scheme of Egypt at the time.
But then something amazing happens. God's blessing is just undeniable. The text says they were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty.
And the land was filled with them. It's incredible growth.
I mean, can you even picture it? From 70 people to, by the time they leave, something like 600,000 men, plus women and children.
Yeah, that's a staggering number.
Yeah.
A population boom that, inevitably changes everything in Egypt.
It totally shifts the power dynamic, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Because then you get this new line of pharaohs coming in, rulers who, the text says, knew not Joseph.
Right. They either didn't know or didn't care about Joseph's history, how he saved Egypt.
Exactly. And seeing this huge, distinct group growing so fast, it sparks fear.
Fear of them becoming too powerful, maybe siding with enemies.
Precisely. And that fear turns into, oppression. They enslave the Israelites, harsh labor, cruel taskmasters. The whole system turns against them.
But here's where it gets really interesting, that paradox you mentioned.
Ah, yes. Exodus 1.12.
Yeah.
The more the oppressors afflicted them.
The more they multiplied and grew. It's almost counterintuitive.
It really is. It speaks volumes about God's sovereignty, doesn't it? That human plans, even cruel ones, can't necessarily stop what he intends.
So thinking about that initial phase, what's the takeaway for you listening now?
Well, maybe it's a reminder, right? Don't take good circumstances for granted. Things can change, sometimes very quickly.
That's a sobering thought. And things definitely got worse, didn't they? The cruelty escalated.
Oh, drastically.
Yeah.
You get to Thutmose around 1532 BC, and he issues this terrifying decree.
The death decree.
Yeah. Kill all the Hebrew male infants. Just wipe them out.
It wasn't just random cruelty, though, was it? There was a strategy.
A chillingly cold strategy. Subdue the population, eliminate the future male line, and probably force the Hebrew women to assimilate into Egyptian culture.
And historically speaking, this is, it's grim. It's the first recorded time Jews were targeted for death simply for being Jews.
A truly dark milestone. And the method, throwing them into the Nile, possibly even as a sick sort of offering to Hapi, the Nile god.
Just awful. But like you said, even in darkness, courage can emerge. And it does from these two women.
The midwives, Shifra and Puah. It's significant that they get named, but the pharaoh behind this decree remains nameless in the account.
Their role is huge. Why did they defy the most powerful man on earth?
Simple. The text says they feared God. That reverence for God was greater than their fear of Pharaoh, so they refused. They let the boys live.
That's incredible bravery, and they were blessed for it.
Yes, God gave them their own families, their own households. But the really striking thing for me...
What's that?
...is their clarity. They didn't need, a detailed theological treatise. They just knew what was right, and they did it. Acts 5.29 comes to mind. We must obey God rather than human beings.
It's that gap between knowing and doing, isn't it? What stands out most to you about their actions?
For me, it's that fundamental courage, acting on conscience, on that God-given sense of right, even when the cost seems impossibly high.
A powerful lesson indeed. And it's into this exact situation, death sentence hanging over every boy that Moses is born.
Right, born under that shadow. Yet he's described immediately as a special son. The Hebrew word is tub.
Tub, meaning good.
Yes, literally good. And get this, it's the same word used back in Genesis 1. When God looked at creation, he saw that it was tub, good, or even very good.
Wow, so it's like a hint that Moses is part of a new creation, God's plan unfolding.
Exactly. It subtly flags him as uniquely part of God's redemptive purpose right from birth.
And his survival story is just Well, miraculous doesn't quite cover it.
It's pure providence. His mother hides him 3 months, then the basket.
Ah, the basket, placed in the Nile.
But that word for basket, teba, it's the same exact Hebrew word used for Noah's Ark.
No way, really?
Yes. Think about it. A small vessel saving one life from destruction, just like the Ark saved humanity. It's packed with meaning.
And his sister Miriam watching. Then Pharaoh's own daughter finds him.
Hatshepsut, likely. She pulls him from the water, adopts him. Even his name reflects it.
Moses, Egyptian, right. Meaning something like son of...
Yes, like Thutmose, son of Thoth. But in Hebrew, it sounds like Moshe, drawn out. Because, as Pharaoh's daughter says, I drew him out of the water. It's brilliant wordplay, layered with meaning.
And then the story gets even more unbelievable.
How so?
He ends up being nursed by his own mother and lives with his Hebrew family for his early years, maybe up to age 12,
It's amazing. He gets grounded in his own heritage before being plunged into the Egyptian court.
where he receives the absolute best education Egypt could offer. Groomed, potentially, to be the next pharaoh.
All the knowledge, the power, the training of the Egyptian elite.
But here's a fascinating thought from one of the sources. How much of that elite worldly education was actually, well, useless?
Useless or even counterproductive for what truly mattered, knowing God and his truth.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? How much are you learning or pursuing that might be ultimately useless for what's truly important in life?
That's a challenging question. And it leads us to this major turning point for Moses.
He's grown now. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew.
And he intervenes. Violently. He kills the Egyptian.
An impulsive act. Righteous anger. It's debated, but the consequence is immediate.
Word gets out. Pharaoh finds out, and Moses' life is suddenly in danger.
So he has to run, flees Egypt entirely, ends up in Midian.
Yep. Sin by a well. All those grand plans of maybe ruling Egypt. Gone. Just like that.
Instead of becoming this, potential god king in Egypt,
He's on the path to serving the true God. It's a complete redirection.
his life breaks down so neatly, doesn't it? 120 years total.
Often seen in 3 acts, yeah.
Yeah.
40 years in Egypt, learning leadership, power, the ways of the world.
Then 40 years in Midian. A total change. Marries Zipporah, becomes a shepherd for his father-in-law, Jethro. Living in obscurity, really.
Learning patience, humility, dependence on God, perhaps. Things he wouldn't learn in a palace.
And then the final 40 years. Leading Israel out of Egypt. That's the story that fills, huge chunks of the Bible.
The bulk of the first 5 books, essentially. But back to that moment, killing the Egyptian.
Yeah, was that God's plan A? Seems unlikely, right?
Probably not, in terms of the specific action. But the story is a powerful example of how God can work through and even use our mistakes, our detours.
Romans 8.28 vibes. God working all things together for good.
Exactly. He can overrule in any situation, weave even our failures into his larger purpose. It doesn't excuse the action, but it shows God's sovereignty over the situation.
It also connects to this bigger, unseen conflict.
Right. The Bible speaks of Satan, the ruler of this world, constantly trying to thwart God's plans.
He was likely the mover, the influence behind that horrific decree to kill the babies, wasn't he? Knowing a deliverer was promised.
It fits the pattern. But the ultimate message is one of hope.
Because
Jesus Christ defeated Satan. On the cross, his victory was decisive. Hebrews 2.11 says, he destroyed the one who holds the power of death.
So even though evil is still active, its ultimate defeat is guaranteed.
Absolutely. John's Gospel and Revelation make that clear. Satan is judged. His end is certain.
And that means for us, for you, the difficulties we face, they aren't the final word.
Not at all. Through Christ, by God's grace, we can overcome. Philippians 4.3 tune, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's our anchor.
Which brings us back to the Israelites groaning under bondage. Things looked hopeless.
Utterly hopeless from a human perspective. But then we get these incredibly important verses at the end of Exodus chapter 2.
The children of Israel groan, and they cried out, and their cry came up to God.
So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob.
And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God acknowledged them. Powerful stuff.
So powerful. Notice the repetition of God, Elohim, the strong, mighty God. 4 times it's linked to his actions.
He heard, remembered, looked on, and acknowledged or was concerned.
It paints this picture of complete awareness, deep compassion, and readiness to act. He's not distant or forgetful.
And remembered his covenant. That doesn't mean he'd forgotten, right?
Not at all. It means the conditions were met, the time was right according to his plan for him to act on that covenant promise. The time for intervention had arrived.
It speaks to his faithfulness.
Unwavering faithfulness.
Okay.
God keeps his promises, his side of the covenant, even when we're unfaithful. His actions here are fulfilling that promise to Abraham's descendants, becoming a great nation.
And there's this sense of God's solidarity with them in their suffering.
Deep solidarity. Isaiah 63:9 puts it beautifully. In all their affliction, he was afflicted. God isn't immune to our pain. He enters into it.
That changes how you see suffering, and it brings us back to that courage, that faith, the midwives again.
Shifra and Pua, yes. Such models. Fearing God over man. It shows that if you truly reverence God, you don't need to tremble before earthly power.
Their respect for the God of life made them respect human life.
Beautifully put. And Moses, too. Years later, after all that palace luxury, he chooses to identify with the suffering Israelites.
Hebrews 11 says he wasn't afraid of Pharaoh's anger because he endured as seeing him who is invisible.
Seeing the invisible. That's faith, isn't it? Perceiving God's reality and his promises, even when circumstances seem to scream the opposite. Seeing with that inward eye.
And that principle, living by faith, seeing the invisible, it's not just ancient history.
Not at all. We heard this great modern story, actually, about a man named Peter Siamikobo from Zambia.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about Peter.
Well, Peter grew up eating things that many wouldn't consider standard food: rats, pigs, something called bubblefish.
Okay, definitely different.
But then he encountered Seventh-day Adventist missionaries who taught him from Leviticus 11 about clean and unclean animals.
Ah, the biblical dietary guidelines.
Exactly. Now, his parents weren't thrilled initially. They discouraged him, even told him he had to work on the Sabbath.
That's tough opposition.
It was. But Peter kept going to the Bible studies. And after he was baptized, he made the decision to stop eating those foods considered unclean. He changed his diet based on his understanding of God's word.
How did his parents react eventually?
Amazingly, over time, they saw his commitment, his changed life, and they actually came to respect his choices. They even started encouraging his Sabbath keeping.
Wow, that's a turnaround.
It really is. And Peter says he's so grateful he learned early about healthy living and, more importantly, about glorifying God with his diet.
Living out that principle from 1 Corinthians. Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God.
Precisely. His story shows that same core principle. Putting God's will first, based on faith in his word, leads to courageous choices. Just like the midwives, just like Moses, acting on that unseen reality.
What a powerful illustration. It really brings it home. This whole journey from blessing to bondage, defiance, deliverance, it just highlights how God is working, even when it's hard to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even in the silence, even in the suffering.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to really chew on, a final thought for you.
Yeah, consider this. The beginning of Exodus shows God present even when he seems silent, even amidst terrible suffering.
Now, one source we looked at posed this idea. What if our seemingly unanswered prayers and disappointed hopes have been among our greatest blessings?
It's a challenging thought. If that could be true, how might that perspective help you reframe the difficulties you're facing right now?
Could it maybe help you look for that invisible hand, that deeper purpose unfolding, even when, honestly, you just can't trace it? Something to think about.